I've always been the type to believe in hard work. Raised by a single mom, I learned early on that nothing comes easy. It wasn't always easy to keep up with bills, and my mom wasn't exactly the best at managing money. I ended up working part-time jobs throughout high school just to help out. That meant I didn't get the usual teenage experiences, no beach trips with friends or shopping sprees on weekends. But I didn't mind. I felt proud of what I could contribute to my family, even if I was still figuring out who I was. After high school, I went to college, studied marketing, and worked 2 jobs to keep my head above water. By the time I was 25, I had a solid job at a digital marketing firm and managed to scrape together enough to buy my first car, a used Toyota Corolla that I lovingly nicknamed Betsy. It wasn't much, but it was mine, paid off in full. Every time I sat behind the wheel, I felt a sense of pride, like I was finally in control of my life, even if it didn't look like the lives my friends had. I was happy with my independence. But that all changed when my mom remarried. I'll admit, I didn't have high hopes for her second marriage. I loved my mom, but her judgment when it came to relationships was always questionable. Her first marriage had been a disaster, and I always felt like she was more focused on finding love than on being a good partner or parent. So when she met Richard, my stepdad, I didn't exactly throw a party. Richard seemed nice enough, but there was something about him that rubbed me the wrong way. It wasn't that he was a bad guy, it was just his kids. Jake and Lily were both a few years younger than me, and when they came into the picture, things started to change. They were the classic privileged kids, rich, entitled, and used to getting whatever they wanted. But it wasn't just their attitude that bothered me, it was how my mom treated them. She went above and beyond to cater to their every whim, constantly putting their needs ahead of mine. I was used to my mom being distant, but this was something else. It wasn't just about the money. It was the way she looked at me as if I didn't matter as much. I could sense the shift in her priorities. I used to call my mom for advice or to talk, but after Richard came into the picture, those calls became more about Jake or Lily's latest drama than about me. Mom stopped asking how my day was going or how work was. Instead, it was always about what Jake wanted for his birthday or how Lily needed a new outfit for school. I don't even remember the last time I felt like I had her attention for something important. Things came to a head when Jake got his license. Unlike me, who had to save every penny to buy my own car, Jake was handed a brand new, shiny SUV as a gift. The worst part? I wasn't even invited to the celebration when it was delivered to their house. It felt like a slap in the face. There I was, working my ass off, making sacrifices to pay off my car, and Jake got a brand new one without lifting a finger. I tried not to show it, but inside, it was eating me alive. The tension between me and my mom grew worse after that. I would visit for family dinners, and it was always about Jake or Lily. Every conversation felt like I had to fight to be seen. But the final straw came one afternoon when I needed a ride to the grocery store. My car was in the shop and I didn't have any other option. "Hey, Mom," I asked casually, "do you think you could take me to the store later?" She didn't even look up from the TV. "Jake needs the car today," she said absent-mindedly, "but you can always buy another one." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. I couldn't believe it. She was telling me, the person who had worked so hard, that I should just buy another one. And it wasn't like she was offering to help out. No, her response was a brush-off, as if I didn't matter, as if my hard work meant nothing. Jake had been handed a car. Lily got whatever she wanted, and I was stuck living in this family that seemed to revolve around them. The worst part? I realized that my mom saw me as nothing more than a backup plan, someone who could fend for herself while her new family was catered to. The car? It wasn't just a possession to me, it was a symbol of everything I had worked for, everything that had been ignored or taken for granted by the people I thought cared about me. As I sat there in my mom's living room, feeling the weight of that moment, I made a decision. I was done being the family's doormat. I was done being the one who was always pushed aside for the sake of others. I had earned that car, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially my mom, take it away from me. It was time to take back control. The next few days felt like a blur. Every time I saw my mom, I could feel the anger simmering under my skin, threatening to spill over. I didn't know how to confront her, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done. Done with feeling invisible, done with her treating me like I was less important than Jake and Lily. I tried to push the thoughts out of my mind, but they kept coming back, like a constant nagging whisper. And then it happened. I was sitting at my desk one evening, going over some work emails, when I got a text from my mom. It was casual, the kind of message you send when you think everything is fine. "Hey, sweetie, just wanted to let you know that Jake's going to be using your car for a while. He needs to drive to his new job, and I think it's only fair since you have a stable income now. I'm sure you understand." I stared at the message, my hands gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Fair? Was she serious? Fair would have been acknowledging the years I had spent struggling and working hard to earn my independence, to buy something for myself. Instead, she handed it over to Jake, like I was the afterthought, the extra person in this family who didn't need anything for herself. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. How could she do this? Again? How could she just give away something that was mine without even asking? I mean, it wasn't just any car, it was the one I had saved for, worked for, and paid off in full. The one I had used to drive myself to my first big job, the one that got me through some of the hardest times of my life. And now it was going to Jake. I spent the next few hours trying to calm myself down, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. She couldn't just do this. This wasn't some little favor like letting him borrow a hoodie or a book. This was my car, my property. And yet, in her eyes, Jake deserved it more. Because why? Because he was her stepson? Because he was her favorite? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. When I finally spoke to her later that evening, I was calm too calm, I think. My voice was steady, but there was a steel edge to it. "Mom," I said, trying to keep the anger from seeping through. "About the car. Why are you giving it to Jake?" She didn't look up from the dishes she was washing, as usual. "Oh, he just needs it more right now, sweetie. You're doing fine. You're a grown-up, and you've got everything together. It just makes more sense for Jake to have it." I wanted to scream, to tell her how wrong she was, to ask how she could possibly think that Jake, who had barely held down a job for more than a month, deserved it more than me. But instead, I bit my tongue. "You know," she continued with a casual shrug, "you can always buy another car when you need one. You've got a good job now. I'm sure you'll figure something out." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. You can always buy another one. It was like she hadn't even considered the years I had spent working my ass off, just to get to where I was, just to have a small piece of stability. I was tired of being treated like my efforts didn't count. I was tired of being overlooked in favor of her golden child. At that moment, something inside me snapped. I had spent years being the dutiful daughter, the one who kept her head down, the one who never complained, but no more. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. I wasn't going to let Jake or her take what was rightfully mine. I couldn't believe it, but the thought took root, and I couldn't shake it. I decided I was going to take the car back. It wasn't about being petty or trying to make some dramatic statement. It was about reclaiming my life, about taking back control over the one thing that was mine. I knew exactly where the spare key was, hidden in the little bowl by the front door where my mom always kept things. It had been there for years, and I'd never thought twice about it. But tonight, it would serve a new purpose. The plan was simple. I would go to the house, grab the key, and take the car back. No big confrontation, no fight. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing how much they'd hurt me. I would just quietly reclaim what was mine, and then I would disappear. It felt like a rush of freedom, the kind of freedom I hadn't realized I was missing, the kind I hadn't allowed myself to believe I deserved. Later that night, I pulled up to the house. the familiar driveway now feeling foreign. I didn't even bother to knock on the door. I just walked inside, grabbed the key, and slipped it into my pocket. Jake's shiny SUV was parked out front, as usual, the very symbol of my mom's misplaced priorities. I made my way to my car, opened the door, and started the engine. And just like that, I was free. I didn't look back as I drove away. I didn't need to. I had my independence back, and that was all that mattered. The first few days after I took the car were a strange mix of relief and unease. I felt empowered, but also like I was walking on eggshells. My phone buzzed constantly, but I ignored every call and message from my mom and stepdad. I didn't owe them an explanation. The car was mine. Simple as that. I spent my time doing things that felt right for me, working, catching up with friends, organizing my apartment, and, for the first time in a long while, feeling like I had control over my own life. It wasn't about the car, not really. It was about showing myself that I could stand up for what I had earned. And if I'm honest, part of me felt a little giddy, knowing that I had taken something from under their noses without them even realizing it. But it didn't take long before the storm hit. It was a Tuesday when my mom first called. The sound of her voice made me cringe, and for a moment I hesitated before answering. "Sweetie, where's the car?" she asked, her voice more shrill than I expected. "Jake's calling me, saying he can't find it. He's upset. He's supposed to be using it this week. We talked about this. Why isn't it where it's supposed to be?" I swallowed my irritation. "It's where it's supposed to be. I took it. It's mine." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her brain processing what I had just said. And then she spoke, her tone suddenly softer, almost condescending. "You're being unreasonable, honey. You know Jake really needs it right now. He's going through some stuff with his new job. He needs the car to get to work. You can't just take it away from him like this." "Mom," I cut her off, my voice cold. "You gave it to him. You handed it over without asking me. You didn't even give me a chance to say anything. And honestly, I don't care what he needs. It's mine, and I'm not giving it back." I expected her to argue, to guilt-trip me like she always did. But this time, there was something different in her voice. A long sigh followed her words. "This is what I mean, sweetie. You're so stubborn. You're acting like you have no family, like you don't care about Jake. He's family too." Her words stung more than I cared to admit. It wasn't the first time she had made me feel like I was the one who didn't belong in the family. It wasn't the first time I had been made to feel like a second-class citizen in my own mother's eyes. But I wasn't going to back down now. "Don't even try that," I said, my voice steady. "You know what this is about. This is about you always choosing him over me. It's about you giving him what's mine, and me never getting anything in return." She was silent for a moment. Then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, she said, "I think you're overreacting, honey. I just don't understand why you're making a big deal out of this. It's just a car. You're being dramatic." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her everything I had been bottling up for years. I wanted to yell about how I'd always been the one who was expected to keep the peace, to be the adult, while Jake and Lily got away with murder. But instead, I just took a deep breath. "I'm not being dramatic, Mom. I'm being done. I'm done with how you treat me like I'm invisible. You're not going to just take what's mine, give it to him, and pretend like it's all fine." "I am your mother, and I expect you to respect me," she snapped. "You're being selfish, and I don't know how you expect us to ever get along if you keep acting like this." It was all I could do not to laugh. My mother had always known how to twist things to make herself the victim, but not this time, not anymore. "I don't need your approval," I said quietly but firmly. "I'm not asking for your permission. I'm done playing the part you've set for me." I hung up before she could say anything else. I didn't feel triumphant or relieved. I felt exhausted. I had finally drawn a line, but I knew that it wasn't going to be as simple as walking away. The next few days were eerily quiet. My phone remained silent, and for a moment I thought maybe my mom was just letting it go. But I should have known better. I was at home, working on a project for work, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I looked through the peephole and saw my stepdad standing there, my heart skipped a beat. I opened the door, trying to remain calm. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Can we talk?" Richard asked, his voice tight with barely contained frustration. I nodded and stepped aside to let him in, though I had no idea where this conversation was going. "You know, this is ridiculous," Richard began as he entered the living room. "Jake really needs that car, and you can't just take it away like it's some kind of joke." "I'm not joking, Richard. It's my car," I said, feeling a knot tighten in my chest. "I worked for it. It's not just some toy that I can give away to whoever demands it." "I'm just trying to help the family here," he replied, pacing slightly. "Jake needs stability, and he's relying on that car to get to work. You can understand that, can't you?" I shook my head, unable to hold back the anger building in my chest. "No, I don't understand. What I understand is that you and my mom always make excuses for him. It doesn't matter what I need. It doesn't matter what I've worked for. He gets everything, and I get nothing." Richard's eyes narrowed. "That's not fair. You're just being selfish. This is a family. You're supposed to help each other out. You don't just take things from your family because you're mad at them." "I've been helping out my whole life, Richard," I snapped, taking a step closer to him. "I've helped everyone, and it's never been enough. You want me to give more, and I'm done. I'm done being the one who always gives and never gets anything in return. You think I'm the selfish one? Look at how you've treated me. Look at how my mom treats me, and then tell me I'm being selfish." There was a long silence between us. I could see Richard wrestling with the words, but he didn't say anything. He just turned toward the door, muttering under his breath. "You know, this won't end well," he said, before walking out without another word. I stood in the middle of the room, shaking with the intensity of the conversation. They all thought I was the problem. They all thought I was the one who was wrong. But I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to back down now. I wasn't just fighting for a car anymore. I was fighting for myself. The days following Richard's visit felt like a countdown to something inevitable. I knew my mom wouldn't let this go. She couldn't stand being challenged, and the reality that I had taken the car and that I wasn't giving it back was eating away at her. But what hurt the most was how she turned on me, twisting the situation until I was the villain in her story. It wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about everything. The years of being overlooked, being treated like I didn't matter. The constant feeling of being the one who had to pick up the pieces while Jake and Lily played the roles of golden children. The resentment that had been festering for years finally reached a boiling point. I wasn't about to let them make me feel guilty. Not anymore. It was Saturday afternoon when the storm hit. I had just returned from running some errands when I saw the text from my mom. I didn't have to read it to know what it was about. It was a plea, a demand, a final attempt at manipulation. "We need to talk, now." I sighed and put my phone down. I knew what this would be. My mom wouldn't just accept my decision. She would never let me walk away from this without a fight. But I was tired of fighting for her approval, tired of putting her and everyone else before myself. So I decided to confront her head-on, once and for all. When I arrived at her house, my heart was already racing. I walked up the familiar steps, knocked once, and let myself in. The house was eerily quiet, and I could hear the muffled sound of my mom and Richard talking in the kitchen. The tension was thick, and I could feel the storm brewing. "Mom?" I called out, stepping into the living room. She appeared in the doorway, her face red and tight with frustration. Richard was behind her, his arms crossed over his chest, a look of irritation on his face. "You've really gone too far this time," my mom said, her voice shaking with anger. "You took the car, and now you're refusing to give it back. This is ridiculous. You're being so selfish." I stood my ground, refusing to let her guilt trip me. "I didn't take it because I'm selfish, Mom. I took it because it's mine. You handed it over to Jake without asking me. You didn't even give me a chance to say anything." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Jake is family, and he needs it. You don't need it. You've always been so self-sufficient. Why do you have to be so difficult?" I could feel the heat rising in my chest. Self-sufficient? You mean you've always treated me like I don't need anything, like I'm fine on my own while you shower Jake with everything. I've had to fight for everything I've gotten, and you've made it clear that nothing I do is ever good enough. You've never supported me the way you support him. Richard stepped forward, his tone cold and defensive. You're acting like this is some huge betrayal, but you're just being unreasonable. Jake is trying to build his life, and you can't even help him out? That's your family you're turning your back on. I laughed, a bitter, sharp sound that made him take a step back. Help him out? I've been helping everyone out my whole life, Richard, but none of that matters because it's never enough for any of you. You all take and take and take, and I'm left with nothing. You think I don't see that? Mom's face twisted with a mixture of hurt and anger. How dare you say that to me? I've always tried to do my best for you. You think it was easy raising you on my own? I never said it was easy, Mom. But it wasn't easy for me either, was it? You were always busy with your own things, your own relationships, your own problems, and I was the one left picking up the pieces. Don't you see? I'm not the problem here. You and Jake and everyone else are. The room was silent for a moment, the words hanging heavy in the air. I could feel the weight of everything I had just said. My chest was tight, my breath shallow, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally being heard. I'm not your backup plan anymore, I said, my voice shaking but resolute. I'm not going to sit here and let you walk all over me just because you think I don't matter. I'm done being the one who's always expected to make everything okay. Richard opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. No, I'm done listening to this. I'm done listening to you two act like I owe you something. The car is mine, and I'm not giving it back. You don't get to control me anymore. I turned and walked toward the door, but my mom called out, her voice shaking with a mixture of fury and disbelief. You're heartless. Do you know what you're doing to this family? We've tried to include you. We've tried. I stopped in my tracks, my hand on the door. For a second, I considered turning around and apologizing, but I knew I wasn't the one who needed to apologize. No, Mom. You've tried to make me the one who always sacrifices for everyone else. You've tried to make me the one who never complains, who just takes whatever is handed to her. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm done. I left the house without another word. The door slammed behind me, but it felt more like freedom than defeat. I wasn't going to be the family's emotional punching bag anymore. I drove away, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I had taken control. I had fought back, and no one could take that away from me. The aftermath hit me in waves. At first, I felt a strange sort of peace, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I had stood up for myself. I had done what I needed to do. The car was mine, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me, not after everything I'd endured. But that peace didn't last long. It wasn't long before the barrage of texts and phone calls from my mom started. At first, it was subtle. A few messages asking if I was okay, trying to sound concerned. Then, as the days went on, the tone shifted. Her texts became more frantic, more insistent, until it felt like an avalanche of guilt being dumped on me. Why are you doing this to your family? Jake is really upset. He needs that car. You're breaking my heart. Don't you care about us? Each message was like a knife twisting deeper into my chest, but I didn't respond. I couldn't. If I let myself get caught up in her guilt trip again, I would just be right back where I started. Her words were designed to manipulate, to make me feel like I was the one who was wrong. But I wasn't wrong. I had to remind myself of that over and over. The phone calls came next, and when I refused to pick up, Richard started texting me too. His messages were full of accusations, calling me selfish, telling me how heartless I was being. They both tried everything to make me feel guilty, but no amount of manipulation could break me down this time. I had spent too many years being the one who gave and gave, only to watch my efforts be taken for granted. Then came the day I couldn't ignore anymore. I was sitting at my desk, working, when my mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. I had just gotten out of a meeting and was finishing up some emails when I heard the knock at my door. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. I opened it slowly, keeping my expression neutral. There she was, standing in front of me, holding a bag of groceries, her face pale and tight with frustration. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, looking like she didn't quite know what to do with herself. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "What are you doing here?" She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her eyes scanning the apartment as if searching for some sign of my wrongdoing. Her lips were pressed together in a thin line, but she said nothing. It wasn't until she placed the bag on the kitchen counter that she spoke, her voice low and careful. "You're making a mistake, you know," she said. "This isn't the way to handle things. You're tearing this family apart." I swallowed hard. I had expected this. I had known this conversation was coming. "Mom, I'm not tearing the family apart. I'm just taking care of myself for once. I'm tired of always being the one who sacrifices." She sighed, rubbing her forehead as if she were trying to hold back tears. "But you are part of this family. You're supposed to put us first. You're supposed to help Jake. You're supposed to be the good daughter." "I am a part of this family, but I'm not a doormat," I replied, my voice growing firmer. "I've always been the one who helped. I've always been the one who put everyone else first. But it's never been enough for you, for Jake, for anyone. You took my car without asking. You took something that I worked so hard for, and you gave it to him. You didn't even give me a chance to speak up." She took a deep breath, her eyes searching mine for some sign of softness. "I don't understand why you're doing this. We've always been there for you. Why can't you just let this go?" I shook my head. "Because I'm tired of letting things go. I'm tired of pretending like I'm okay with being treated like this. I've given everything for this family, and it's never been enough." Her expression softened for a moment, but the moment passed quickly, replaced by frustration. "Jake needs that car. He deserves it. You've always been so independent. Don't you think it's time to let him have something?" I felt the last of my patience snap. "No, Mom. He doesn't deserve it. He hasn't earned it. He's gotten everything handed to him on a silver platter, and I'm sick of it. I've worked my ass off for everything I've had, and I'm not letting you just take it away from me. Not anymore." She opened her mouth to say something, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Mom, I'm done. I'm done trying to earn your approval. I'm done trying to be the person you want me to be. I'm me, and I'm not apologizing for that anymore. This car? It's not just a car. It's a symbol of everything I've worked for, and I'm not giving it up." The silence in the room was deafening. For a moment, I thought she might say something else, try to convince me again, but instead, she just stood there, her eyes welling up with tears that she refused to let fall. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Mom," I said softly. "I'm just asking for you to understand. I'm doing what's best for me now." She didn't answer. She didn't say anything more. After a long, heavy silence, she turned and left, the door closing behind her with a quiet click. I stood there for a while, my heart racing. I had said what I needed to say. I had set my boundary, and for the first time, I wasn't second-guessing myself. As the days passed, the calls and messages stopped. I didn't hear from my mom or Richard for weeks. At first, I thought maybe they were giving me space, but eventually, I realized something else. They weren't going to beg me to come back. They weren't going to apologize. They had their own way of dealing with things, just like I had mine. And that was okay. I had my life back. I had my car. I had my independence. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next blow to come. I was living for myself, finally, and that was more than enough.